All right, get ready, because we're going deep into paradoxes today.
Paradoxes, yeah. Those brain-twisting ideas that seem to contradict themselves.
But, they can actually help us find some hidden truths.
Exactly. And they're not just like abstract little puzzles either.
No, they really touch on, everything.
Oh, yeah. They really do. From personal choices
to, the very nature of reality itself. It's wild.
We've got a lot to cover today.
We do. We have a ton of sources about paradoxes.
All kinds of paradoxes.
And we're going to try to explore as many as we can.
That's right.
Let's jump right in with one of the most famous ones, the crocodile paradox. So picture this.
Okay.
A crocodile, he snatches a child, but then promises to return the child.
Oh.
If the parent can guess correctly whether the crocodile will return the child or not.
I see.
So if the parent says, "You're going to give me back my kid," what happens?
Well, the crocodile's like, you're right, so I have to give you back your child, but then that means you guessed wrong.
Because if the crocodile was actually going to return the child, then the parent would have been wrong to guess that.
Yeah, that's the trick.
But on the other hand, if the parent says, "You're going to keep my kid,"
right,
then the crocodile can be like, "Well, now I have to give the child back to prove you wrong. But then you were right."
It's a classic logic trap.
It's a total no-win situation.
It is. It highlights how some agreements can be set up so that no matter what you do,
they're screwed.
You can't win. It's like some messed up legal contracts or political promises,
Totally. Makes you think about all those hidden clauses and fine print.
Yeah, where it's like,
you think you understand something, and then bam.
You're trapped.
It's a classic power move.
It is.
To control the rules of the game.
Yeah, and it makes you think, are there bigger systems in society where this kind of dynamic is playing out?
That's a great question. Okay, let's move on to another fascinating paradox, the friendship paradox. So, have you ever felt like all your friends have way more friends than you do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's
like a universal experience almost.
It's pretty common.
It is, and it's not just, a feeling, it's actually a real thing.
It's a real phenomenon.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it, how social networks work. Those people who have tons of friends, they're more likely to be friends with you
than someone who's just got, a couple close friends.
Right.
And that actually skews the average number of friends that everyone seems to have.
Exactly. They're those highly connected people that kind of pull the average up for everyone else.
So it's kind of like those popular kids in high school who are friends with, everybody.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then because they're friends with you, it makes it seem like everyone has more friends than you do.
They're like those social butterflies fluttering around.
Yeah, and now with social media.
Oh my gosh.
It's amplified, right?
Yeah, it's like
you're constantly comparing yourself to these influencers who seem to know everyone and do everything.
And it's like they're always on vacation,
Right.
Meanwhile, I'm just trying to get to work on time.
Just a curated view of their life.
Right. It's not even real.
It's not the whole picture, but it makes you feel inadequate.
Yeah.
It's like a distorted mirror.
Exactly. It's a distorted mirror. So this paradox really helps us see how our own perspective is really limited.
Right. And how those comparisons can be so misleading.
Okay. This next paradox is, it's a big one.
Okay.
The tolerance paradox. Are you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
Can a tolerant society tolerate intolerance?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, it's a question that's been debated for ages.
And there are no easy answers.
Yeah, for sure.
But this guy, Karl Popper, he was a philosopher, and he argued that unlimited tolerance can lead to its own destruction.
That's interesting. So, if you're too tolerant of everything, even harmful things, those harmful things can take over.
Yeah, kind of like a weed in a garden.
Oh, I like that.
Right? It's like if you let a weed grow unchecked, it just takes over the whole garden and chokes out all the other plants.
So are you saying, if a society is too tolerant of hate speech or violence, it can undermine the very freedoms that make tolerance possible?
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
It is. Popper wasn't advocating for, silencing all opposing views.
Right.
But he did think we have to draw a line.
Yeah.
When those views threaten basic rights and safety.
Right, but how do you define that line? How do we know when we've crossed it?
That's the tricky part. It's a balancing act. How do you protect free speech without allowing hate speech to flourish?
Exactly. It's such a slippery slope.
Yeah, it really is. And, you've seen this play out in history too, right?
Oh, yeah.
With the rise of, authoritarian regimes.
Where things started out okay.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's wait a minute.
Things took a dark turn.
Yeah. How did we get here?
It can happen really fast.
It can. It can happen really fast.
Yeah.
So tolerance isn't something you can just like set and forget.
Right. It takes constant effort,
Yeah.
dialogue, and,
Sometimes really tough choices.
yeah, you got to be willing to stand up for those values that make tolerance possible in the first place.
That's a powerful point. Okay, let's move on to something a little less heavy, but something I think almost everyone can relate to.
Okay.
It's called the paradox of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever felt like overwhelmed by just like having too many options?
Oh, absolutely. Like trying to pick a movie on Netflix. I
Yeah.
spend more time browsing than actually watching anything.
It's like you're standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store and there are just like a million different kinds of cereal.
And you end up leaving with the same one you always get.
Exactly. It's like more choices should equal more freedom and happiness.
Right. It seems logical.
But the funny thing is,
Yeah.
it doesn't really work out that way, does it?
It really doesn't. The research shows that too much choice can actually lead to more anxiety, indecision, and even less satisfaction.
It's so weird.
It is counterintuitive.
So what can we do about this? Like, how can we not get paralyzed by all the choices?
Well, one thing that can help is becoming what they call a satisficer.
The satisficer.
Yeah, it's basically someone who aims for good enough instead of like striving for the absolute best all the time.
Oh, so it's like not getting caught up in trying to find the perfect thing.
Exactly. Like just find something that meets your basic needs and move on.
Right. I mean, I can spend hours researching, the best headphones or the best hiking boots.
I feel that. It's like analysis paralysis.
And then at the end of it all,
Yeah.
I'm just like more stressed out and confused than I was before.
Totally. It's exhausting. Embracing that good enough mindset can free up a lot of mental energy.
It's like give yourself permission to just be happy with something that works,
Yep.
Okay, ready for another one? This one's really interesting to me. It's the value paradox.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that about?
So think about this. Why is water, which is like essential for life,
Yeah,
so cheap,
right.
while diamonds, which are basically pretty rocks, are so expensive?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It does make sense on the surface, right?
All right.
But when you dig a little deeper, it reveals something really interesting about how we determine value.
Yeah, what is it?
So value isn't really about inherent worth.
Ah.
It's actually influenced by things like how scarce something is, how available it is,
Okay.
and really importantly, how we perceive it.
Right.
Like diamonds, they're rare, right?
Yeah,
And they're marketed as this symbol of luxury and status,
totally.
which drives up their perceived value.
And then water, at least in many parts of the world, is abundant.
Right. We take it for granted because it's all around us.
Yeah, and that makes it seem less valuable even though it's crucial for our survival.
It really highlights how disconnected price can be from actual importance.
Yeah, it makes you think about all the things we undervalue just because they're common or readily available.
It does. It makes you appreciate those things a little bit more. Okay, let's wrap up this first part of our paradox journey with one more.
All right, bring it on.
It's called the paradox of thrift. Are you ready for this?
I am.
This might sound a little crazy,
Okay.
but are you telling me that saving money can actually be bad for the economy?
It does sound a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's a thing.
It's a real economic phenomenon.
Yeah, it is. So saving is usually considered a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's responsible. You got to save for a rainy day.
Exactly. But the paradox arises when everyone starts saving a lot more at the same time,
Okay.
because that means people are spending less.
Right.
And when people spend less, businesses suffer. They have to lay off workers.
And that can lead to a recession.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like a domino effect. One person's attempt to be financially responsible can actually contribute to a larger economic downturn.
That's wild.
It is. It's all about that delicate balance between saving and spending.
Right. It's like a seesaw.
Yeah. And understanding this paradox can help us make better choices both as individuals and as a society.
So it's like we need to think about the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
All right. That's it for part 1 of our deep dive into paradoxes. Join us for part 2, where we'll explore even more mind-bending concepts that challenge our understanding of time, reality, and the limits of logic itself. All right, welcome back to our Paradoxathon. I'm still reeling from all the mind-bending ideas we've already explored.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? But we're just getting started.
Oh, good, because I think my brain is finally warmed up.
Excellent. Then you're ready for the Sorites paradox.
The Sorites Paradox. What's that one about?
Well, imagine a heap of sand,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
a big pile of sand.
Got it.
Now, if you remove one grain of sand,
Okay.
is it still a heap?
Yeah, of course. One grain doesn't make a difference.
Right. But what if you keep removing grains one at a time?
Okay, at some point, it's definitely not a heap anymore.
Exactly. But where's the line?
Yeah, that's a good question. When does it stop being a heap?
That's the paradox. There's no clear cutoff point.
So it's like it's a heap, it's a heap, it's a heap, and then suddenly it's not.
Yeah, it highlights how some concepts are fuzzy. They don't have clear boundaries.
So are you saying, like, there's no such thing as a heap?
No, not exactly. It's more about recognizing that some terms are vague. Think about baldness.
Okay.
When does someone become bald? Is it 1 hair, 10 hairs, 100?
Yeah, I see your point. It's not like there's a precise number of hairs that determines baldness.
Right. And the same goes for lots of concepts, like wealth.
Oh, yeah, like how much money do you have to be considered rich?
Exactly. It's all relative.
So what's the takeaway from the Sorite's paradox? Do we need to, like, come up with super specific definitions for everything?
Not necessarily. Vague terms are useful because they allow us to communicate efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, if we had to define every single word precisely, conversations would take forever.
Exactly. But the paradox reminds us to be mindful of that vagueness.
Okay, so it's about being aware of the context and recognizing that not everything fits neatly into a box.
Right on. It's about embracing the gray areas.
Okay, from heaps of sand to ships that sail through time, let's talk about the ship of Theseus.
Ah, another classic.
This one's all about identity.
Okay.
Imagine a ship that's perfectly maintained over centuries.
Okay.
As parts wear out, they're replaced with identical ones.
Right.
Eventually, every single piece of the original ship has been replaced.
Wow.
So is it still the same ship?
That's a tough one. It makes you question what really defines an object's identity. Is it the material it's made of? The structure? Or is it something more like its history, its purpose?
And to make it even trickier, what if someone took all those old parts and built a second ship?
Ooh, I like that twist. Which one would be the real ship of Theseus then?
Right. It's a bit like asking if you're still the same person you were 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, great analogy. You've changed, you've had new experiences, your cells have regenerated.
But there's still a continuity there, right?
Exactly. It's like a river. The water is constantly flowing, changing, but it's still the same river.
So the ship of Theseus is really about how identity is a process, a journey of change and continuity.
Beautifully put. It invites us to think about how things evolve over time while still maintaining a connection to their past.
Okay, let's talk about a paradox that I think we've all experienced at some point. The catch-22.
Ah, yes. The classic dilemma of needing experience to get a job, but not being able to get experience without a job.
It's so frustrating. You're trapped in this impossible loop.
Joseph Heller, who coined the term in his novel, used it to describe those absurd situations.
Yeah, those situations where you're caught in a web of contradictory rules.
And it's like the system is designed to keep you stuck.
So how do you even break free from a catch-22?
Sometimes it takes thinking outside the box, finding a loophole in the system.
Or maybe just getting lucky.
Yeah, sometimes that's all it is.
It's a reminder that sometimes the rules are arbitrary.
And that sometimes you have to challenge those rules.
All right, are you ready for a trip to infinity?
Always. Where are we going?
Let's check into the Grand Hotel.
The Grand Hotel.
This one's all about the weirdness of infinity.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So picture a hotel with an infinite number of rooms.
Infinite rooms. That's a big hotel.
And every single room is full.
Okay, so there's no vacancy.
Not in the usual sense.
Yeah.
But then a new guest arrives.
What do they do?
Well, in a normal hotel, that would be a problem.
Right, no room at the inn.
But in the Grand Hotel, they just ask each guest to move to the next room.
So guest 1 goes to room 2, guest 2 goes to room 3, and so on.
Exactly. And just like that, room 1 is free for the new guest.
But what if, like, a whole busload of new guests arrives?
No problem. They just ask each guest to double their current room number.
So guest 1 goes to room 2, guest 2 goes to room 4, guest 3 goes to room 6, and so on.
You got it. Now all the odd-numbered rooms are free.
That's crazy. You can always make room in an infinite hotel.
It is crazy. It shows how differently infinity works compared to finite numbers.
It really challenges our intuition about space and fullness.
Okay, hold on your hats because we're about to go even deeper into the weirdness of reality with Schrodinger's cat.
Ah, yes, the thought experiment that makes everyone's head spin.
So, are you ready for this? Imagine a cat in a box.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
And inside the box, there's a device that has a 50-50 chance of releasing a deadly poison.
Oh no, poor kitty.
But here's the thing. Until we open the box and look inside, we don't know whether the poison has been released or not.
So the cat is both alive and dead at the same time.
In a sense, yes. It's in a state called quantum superposition.
Wait, how can something be in two states at once?
That's the mind-blowing part of quantum mechanics. At the subatomic level, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously. It's only when we observe them that they collapse into a single state.
So the act of observing determines the cat's fate.
It's one way to interpret it. Schrödinger's cat is really about highlighting the strangeness of quantum mechanics and how it challenges our everyday understanding of reality.
So it's not really about a cat at all.
Not really. It's about the limits of our intuition when we try to apply it to the quantum world.
So does this mean there are like multiple versions of us existing in different realities?
That's a whole other conversation. We could talk about the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Maybe another time.
Okay, let's zoom out from the subatomic world to the vastness of the cosmos with the Fermi paradox.
Ah, the big question. Where is everyone?
Right. If the universe is so big and full of stars and planets,
Yeah,
statistically speaking, shouldn't there be other intelligent life out there?
it seems like it.
But why haven't we found any evidence of it?
That's the paradox. It's the conflict between the high probability of alien life existing somewhere and the complete lack of any conclusive evidence.
So what are the possible explanations? Are they hiding? Are we just not looking in the right places?
There are a lot of theories out there. Maybe intelligent life is incredibly rare. Or maybe civilizations tend to self-destruct before they can reach out to other worlds.
Or maybe they're so advanced that we wouldn't even recognize them as intelligent.
That's a spooky thought.
It is. It makes
Yeah.
you realize how little we actually know about the universe and our place in it.
It's a call for humility and a reminder that we're still at the very beginning of our exploration of the cosmos.
Okay, let's come back down to Earth, at least metaphorically, with the unexpected hanging paradox. This one plays with our understanding of knowledge and surprise.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, imagine a judge sentencing a prisoner to death by hanging. The judge says the hanging will happen at noon on one weekday next week, but the prisoner won't know which day until the executioner arrives.
Oh, that's cruel.
It is.
Wow.
It's designed to keep the prisoner in a state of constant anxiety.
Hmm.
But here's where the paradox comes in. The prisoner starts thinking, okay, if I'm still alive on Thursday afternoon, then it must be happening on Friday.
Right, because it has to be on a weekday.
But then he realizes, wait a minute, if I know it's going to happen on Friday, then it won't be a surprise, and the judge said it would be a surprise.
Ah, I see. So he eliminates Friday as a possibility.
Exactly. And then he works backward, eliminating Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday.
So he concludes that the hanging can't happen at all.
Right. Because it can't be a surprise if he's already ruled out all the possibilities.
But then the executioner shows up on, let's say, Wednesday, and the prisoner is completely shocked.
Whoa, that's messed up. It's like his attempt to outsmart the system backfired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The unexpected hanging paradox shows how our reasoning about the future can be influenced by our knowledge of the present and how that can sometimes lead to unexpected outcomes.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in reverse.
It is. It makes you wonder if we can ever truly predict the future, or if the very act of trying to predict it changes the course of events.
Okay, let's dive into another paradox that plays with logic and self-reference. The barber paradox. Imagine a village where the barber shaves all men who don't shave themselves.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The question is, who shaves the barber?
That's a tricky one.
It is. Because if he shaves himself, then he violates the rule.
Because he's only supposed to shave those who don't shave themselves.
Right. But if he doesn't shave himself, then according to the rule, he must shave himself.
So he's stuck in a logical loop.
It's a classic example of a self-contradictory statement.
It's like those sentences that say, this statement is false.
If it's true, then it's false. And if it's false, then it's true.
The barber paradox shows how easily logic can break down when it gets tangled up in self-reference.
It makes you realize that language can be a tricky thing.
And that sometimes the simplest questions can lead to the most profound philosophical puzzles.
Okay, are you ready for a mind-bending time travel adventure?
I'm always up for a time travel paradox. What do we have?
Let's talk about the bootstrap paradox.
The bootstrap paradox. I'm not familiar with that one.
This one's all about the idea of an object or piece of information existing in the present because it was brought back from the future, but its origin in the past is a mystery.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
Let me give you an example. Imagine you're a musician
Okay.
and you find this old sheet music for a beautiful melody you've never heard before.
Right.
You learn it, perform it, and it becomes your signature piece.
Okay.
Years later, you invent a time machine and decide to go back to the time when that music was supposedly composed.
Okay, I'm following.
But When you get there, you realize that you're the one who gave the sheet music to the composer, having brought it back from the future.
Whoa, so where did the music actually come from?
That's the paradox. It has no clear origin.
It's like it just popped into existence out of thin air.
The bootstrap paradox challenges our linear understanding of cause and effect. It suggests that in a time travel scenario, something can be both its own cause and its own effect.
It's like a time loop where the beginning and the end are the same point.
Makes you wonder if time is really a straight line, or if it's more like a circle, or maybe even a pretzel.
It's a time pretzel. I like that image.
Okay, let's come back down to earth with a paradox that's a bit more straightforward, but still thought-provoking. The sword and shield paradox.
Okay, this one sounds interesting.
So imagine a merchant who's boasting about two of his products. A sword that can cut through anything,
Okay.
and a shield that can block anything.
Sounds like a classic sales pitch.
It is. But the question is, what happens when the unstoppable sword meets the immutable shield?
Ah, I see the paradox. They can't both be true.
Exactly. The sword and shield paradox is all about the dangers of absolute claims.
It's a reminder that the world is rarely black and white. There are always nuances and exceptions.
And that even the strongest sword might have a weakness, and the sturdiest shield might eventually crumble.
It's a call for humility and a recognition that our knowledge is always incomplete.
Okay, let's move on to a paradox that's a bit more whimsical but still gets at some deep philosophical questions. The Pinocchio paradox.
Okay, I love Pinocchio, so I'm excited about this one.
So the question is, what happens when Pinocchio says, "My nose will grow now"?
That's a good one.
Because if he's telling the truth, then his nose shouldn't grow.
But his nose only grows when he lies.
Exactly. So if his nose does grow, it means he was lying, which means it shouldn't grow.
But if it doesn't grow, then he was telling the truth, which means it should grow.
It's a self-contradictory statement that creates an endless loop.
It's like the barber paradox, but with a wooden puppet.
It makes you realize that language can be a powerful tool, but it can also be used to create paradoxes that defy easy answers.
It's a reminder that sometimes the truth is more complicated than we might think.
Okay, let's dive into a paradox that might make you question everything you thought you knew about statistics. Simpson's paradox.
Simpson's paradox. I've heard of that one, but I'm not sure I fully understand it.
It's basically about how data can be misleading if we're not careful about how we interpret it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine two medical treatments, treatment A and treatment B. Overall, treatment A has a higher success rate than treatment B.
Okay, so treatment A seems like the better option.
But here's the twist. When you break down the data by age group, let's say, you find that treatment B is actually more effective for both younger and older patients.
Wait, what? How is that possible?
It's because of lurking variables, which are basically hidden factors that influence the data.
So it's like there's something else going on behind the scenes that's skewing the results.
Exactly. For example, maybe treatment A is more commonly used on patients who are already high risk.
Ah, I see. That would make it seem less effective overall, even if it's actually doing a good job in specific cases.
Right. Simpson's paradox is a reminder that we need to be critical of statistics and to look for those hidden variables that might be influencing the results.
It's a call for transparency and careful interpretation. Just because the numbers say one thing doesn't mean that's the whole story.
Okay, from misleading data to a paradox that challenges our very understanding of motion. The dichotomy paradox. This one takes us back to ancient Greece and the mind of Zeno.
Zeno, the master of paradoxes, what did he come up with this time?
So imagine you're trying to walk across a room. To reach the other side, you first have to cover half the distance.
Right.
But to cover that half, you first have to cover half that distance.
And so on, and so on.
Exactly. You're constantly dividing the distance into smaller and smaller segments.
So you never actually reach the other side.
That's what Zeno argued. He said that motion is impossible because you can always keep having the distance.
But we know motion is possible. We walk, run, fly, dance. We experience motion every day.
Right. So how do we resolve this paradox? Do we just ignore it and keep walking?
Not quite. The paradox actually led to some important mathematical insights. The distances involved form what's called a convergent infinite series, which means that even though there are infinitely many steps, they add up to a finite distance.
So it's like, even though we can conceptually divide the distance into an infinite number of steps, in reality, we're still covering a finite distance in a finite amount of time.
Exactly. The dichotomy paradox shows how our intuition about motion can be challenged by the logic of mathematics.
Okay, let's talk about a paradox that's practically synonymous with time travel. The grandfather paradox. What happens if you travel back in time and kill your grandfather?
Ah, the classic time travel dilemma. But wouldn't that create a paradox?
It would. Because if you killed your grandfather before he met your grandmother,
Then you wouldn't exist.
exactly. So how could you have traveled back in time in the first place?
It's a mind-boggling question. It seems to violate the very laws of causality.
The grandfather paradox is a classic example of the potential for inconsistencies if time travel to the past were possible.
It's like those stories where someone goes back in time and accidentally changes something that alters the course of history.
Right. But does it prove that time travel is impossible? Or are there ways around the paradox?
Some theories suggest that time travel might create parallel universes or alternate timelines.
So maybe you could go back in time and change things.
But you'd be doing it in a different branch of reality.
So it's like your actions wouldn't affect your original timeline.
Exactly. You'd essentially be creating a whole new universe with every change you make.
That's pretty wild. The grandfather paradox really makes you think about the nature of time and the potential consequences of tampering with the past.
It's a cautionary tale for any aspiring time travelers out there.
Okay, let's shift gears from the cosmic to the seemingly mundane with the grain of millet paradox. This one's about the power of small things.
Okay, I like where this is going. Small things can make a big difference.
So the question is, if a single grain of millet falls, does it make a sound?
That's a tricky one. I mean, one grain is so tiny.
Right. Our ears probably wouldn't even register it.
But what if you drop a handful of grains?
Then we might start to hear a faint rustling.
And what if you drop a whole bag of millet?
Then it would definitely make a sound.
Exactly. The grain of millet paradox is about those subtle transitions, those thresholds where a small change suddenly becomes noticeable.
It's like the Sored's paradox with the heap of sand.
Right. It's about how small actions can add up to create something much bigger.
It's a reminder that even the tiniest things can have an impact.
And that sometimes the most profound changes happen gradually, almost imperceptibly, over time.
Okay, for our last paradox in this part of our deep dive, let's look up at the night sky and ponder Olber's paradox. Why is the night sky dark?
Olber's paradox, that sounds familiar. Isn't it something to do with the universe being infinite?
It is. If the universe is infinite and filled with stars, then every line of sight should eventually end on a star.
So the night sky should be blazing with light.
But it's not. It's mostly dark, with just a scattering of stars visible.
So why is that?
The answer has to do with the fact that the universe isn't static.
It's expanding.
Exactly. And it has a finite age.
So the light from the most distant stars hasn't had time to reach us yet.
That's part of it. The expansion of the universe also stretches the light from distant galaxies, causing something called redshift.
Redshift.
It basically shifts the light towards the red end of the spectrum, making it less visible.
So it's like the light is still there, but it's become too faint for us to see.
And some of it is even shifted out of the visible spectrum altogether.
Wow, so the darkness of the night sky is actually telling us something about the history and structure of the universe.
It is. It's a reminder that the universe is constantly evolving and that we're only seeing a snapshot of its vastness.
Olber's paradox is a beautiful example of how a seemingly simple question can lead to some profound insights about the cosmos.
We've covered some serious ground in this second part of our paradox journey. From heaps of sand to infinite hotels, from time travel dilemmas to the darkness of the night sky.
It's been a whirlwind tour of the strange and wonderful world of paradoxes.
And we're not done yet. Get ready for even more mind-bending paradoxes in part 3, where we'll explore the limits of logic, the power of small changes, and the surprising benefits of failure. All right, paradox adventurers, we're back for the final round of our mind-bending exploration.
Get ready for some more twists and turns as we delve into even stranger territory.
I'm strapped in and ready for takeoff. What's first on our paradox agenda?
Let's start with one that might make you question everything you thought you knew about evidence. It's called the paradox of the raven.
Paradox of the raven. Okay, that sounds intriguing.
So imagine you're trying to prove the statement, all ravens are black.
All right, seems straightforward enough.
You might think the best way to do that is to go out and find a bunch of black ravens.
Yeah, the more black ravens you find, the stronger your evidence seems.
But here's the thing. Observing a green apple also provides evidence for that statement.
Wait, what? A green apple? How does that even relate to ravens?
It's all about logic. The statement, all ravens are black, is logically equivalent to the statement, if something is not black, then it is not a raven.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. A green apple is definitely not black, and it's definitely not a raven.
Exactly. So by observing a green apple, you're essentially confirming the second statement, which in turn supports the first statement.
So it's like a roundabout way of proving that all ravens are black.
Precisely, but it feels counterintuitive, right? Our
Yeah.
brains want to look for direct evidence.
Yeah, a black raven feels like much stronger proof than a green apple.
And that's because we tend to prioritize relevance and informativeness over pure logic.
So it's like a clash between formal logic and our common sense about what counts as good evidence.
The paradox of the raven highlights the importance of critical thinking when it comes to evaluating information.
We need to consider not just whether something is logically valid, but also how meaningful it is in the real world.
It's about looking beyond the surface and understanding the nuances of evidence.
Okay, from ravens and apples to ecosystems on the brink, let's talk about the paradox of enrichment.
Ah, yes, this one shows how even the best intentions can sometimes have unintended consequences.
I'm all ears, tell me more.
Imagine a wildlife reserve where conservationists are trying to protect a predator-prey relationship.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They decide to help the prey animals by enriching their habitat with more food and resources.
Seems like a good idea. Give them plenty to eat.
On the surface, yes. But here's where things get tricky. That abundance of food leads to a population boom for the prey animals,
Okay, that makes sense. More food, more babies.
which in turn allows the predator population to explode as well. They have more to eat.
Oh no, I see where this is going.
Eventually, the predators overconsume their prey, leading to a collapse of both populations. What started as an attempt to help actually ends up harming the ecosystem.
It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
The paradox of enrichment teaches us that simply adding resources to a system isn't always the solution.
We need to understand the delicate balance of ecosystems and the potential for unintended consequences.
It's about focusing on resilience and interconnectedness rather than just throwing resources at a problem.
It's a lesson that applies to so many areas of life, not just ecology.
Absolutely, from economics to social systems to even our own personal lives.
Okay, ready for a paradox that could revolutionize the way businesses think about customer service.
Hit me with it.
It's called the service recovery paradox.
Service recovery paradox. That sounds interesting. Does it have to do with making up for mistakes?
It does. It suggests that a service failure, when handled exceptionally well, can actually lead to higher customer satisfaction than if the failure had never happened.
Whoa, really? That's counterintuitive.
I know, right? But think about it. Imagine you have a terrible experience at a restaurant. The food is cold, the service is slow, you're ready to walk out.
I've been there.
But then the manager comes over, genuinely apologizes, offers you a free meal, goes above and beyond to make things right.
Okay, I can see how that might actually turn things around. You'd feel like they really cared about your experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The service recovery paradox shows that it's not about being perfect. It's about how you handle those inevitable slip-ups.
It's about turning a negative experience into a positive one by demonstrating genuine care and concern.
It's a powerful reminder that vulnerability and accountability can actually build trust and loyalty.
Sometimes admitting your mistakes and taking steps to fix them can be more impactful than trying to pretend you're always right.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of paradoxes. My mind is officially blown, but in the best way possible.
It's been a whirlwind tour of logic, time, space, and the limits of human understanding.
We've explored paradoxes that challenge our assumptions about reality, identity, and even the nature of truth itself.
Paradoxes remind us that the world is full of mystery and wonder, and that the search for knowledge is an ongoing journey.
So to all our listeners out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the paradoxes that make life so endlessly fascinating.
And remember, sometimes the most profound truths are hidden within those seemingly impossible contradictions.
Until next time, stay curious, paradox seekers.